Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. This channel cares for hearts and minds, and every week, together with Dr. Evas, we have conversations around mental health in the areas of family, marriage, relationships, parenting, and the workplace. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel, like this episode, and also comment. We love hearing your feedback. It's very, very important to us that we hear back from you so that we know that what we are talking about is making sense and is helping you in some shape or form. Today is no different. We are going to be talking about boarding school and how that affects or impacts the parent-child bond. So you might be watching, you went to boarding school and you've noticed certain things about your relationship with your parent, and you think maybe the fact that they sent you to boarding school when they did affected your relationship or impacted your relationship. And then of course we'll also be talking to parents, addressing parents on when the appropriate time is. Are there children who are suited to go to boarding school? How do you prepare your child to go to boarding school? And then how do you maintain a bond between you and your child? So welcome to the show. And welcome, Dr. Evas.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Evas, for those of you that are new here, is the founder of International Center for Mental Health and Family Care. And she's also a trained therapist in the areas of marriage, parenting, and life. She's a life coach. So please, please, please take advantage of the contacts in our scroll or in our description box. If you need support, you don't even have to have an issue. Just reach out to her with your partner. Or if you have a parenting question, together with her team of therapists, they will support you. So, Dr. Evas, boarding school. I was actually thinking just before we came on how I actually wanted to ask you, your children have been to boarding school. Have they?
One
of them.
Only one
Okay.
of the five. And
How did you come to that
rest.
conclusion? And why
no,
did the
so
rest?
the firstborns who are twins. Both of them started off in boarding school, and one of them later on came out and went to day school, and the other one, who was in Gayaza, so kept in boarding school.
Yeah.
And so since that time, we didn't take our children to boarding school again. Yeah, we just had the one who was in Gayaza finish, and the rest. I do a lot of mother hen
Okay.
kind of parenting, keeping with them until they are going to uni. So the rest go to boarding school when they're going to university.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have your reasons.
Yeah.
And maybe we can talk about those both in a broad sense and personal if you feel led to share why parents end up making this decision to take their children to boarding school. What are some of the reasons parents give for making this decision?
As a matter of fact, parenting is challenging, especially in the current world. I can never stop being hysterical about our parents' arrangements. Although, of course, even us, we went to boarding school. Now, there is a contextual issue, especially in this country, where children go to boarding school at age 12, 11. I've been to countries where the boarding school arrangement is not so much, especially countries in the down south. Yes, they children study and they study half day.
Interesting.
Like in South Africa, I've seen children really study half day. Other countries, I remember I had one of my bosses, my colleagues from Australia. When she came here the first time, she was so in shock at the rate at which parents send their children to boarding school. She was very concerned, and so so it's a contextual issue. That's number one. Number two, the business of life. Parents working and balancing work and parenting. I mean, if someone works from very early morning to late in the evening, and having to pick children from school. Some of the schools are not conveniently placed in areas where parents are able to make it easy. It can be crazy. And so some parents take their children to school for convenience. I'll talk about convenience, please. Yeah, so they do that. Others take children to boarding schools out of ignorance. Because now, I'll tell you, Rachel, we have children as young as 3 years in boarding school.
I've heard.
You've heard.
Yeah.
It's painful.
It's painful.
Even thinking about it is painful. So we have children that young and they are taken to boarding school. And so some parents are doing it for convenience. For convenience, not as a matter of can't help, but convenience. They just want. I've had some parents say, I also have to have life. And so they will get their little children to I was actually talking to one of the school administrators and I said, no way. And because I think in this country, some of the things go unregulated. So I don't think it's, I remember one time when we were having one of our children go to P1, the school refused. They said they have to be 6 years. And there is a reason, which I'll tell you. So parents in this crazy, busy world, they're trying to find convenience and say, I have to rest, I have to have life, I have to connect with friends, I have children. They view children as a burden. And so they just want convenience. I also told you that out of ignorance, parents are taking children to boarding schools. And let me just expound on that. Some of them think that actually when you take your child to boarding school, they're going to learn a hard way.
Yes. They're going to be resilient.
They're going to be resilient.
Yes.
They don't know that actually when a child is exposed to that harshness of life, they lose out on the soft part of their lives. And so they develop what we call a hard skin.
So
now,
early though.
So early. So they lose out on being a child and going through a whole healthy process where they are able to, their lives are able to accommodate certain things. I hope I've answered.
That makes sense.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's the question of how early is too early, and I think you mentioned that when you were talking about some of the reasons that people take their children to school. And what I'm hearing you saying is some of it is circumstantial, some of it is for convenience, some of it is out of ignorance. Are we taking our children to boarding school early? And I guess that begs the question, is there an appropriate age or time to take a child to boarding school?
Look, I probably wouldn't just say this is the time, but let me explain certain things. Number one, we all know that there is a period we call character formation.
Yeah.
So the character formation stage is actually 0 to 5 years. And I already explained this. So a child from 0 to 1 year, they are purely just, they were born to self-centeredness. They have no character developed. They are just there. But then age 1.5 to 5, that's when we introduce principles that help a person to be a good human being. And the principles, and I think I've mentioned on this show that life runs 98% on principles.
Yeah.
And so this child's internal working model that helps them to interact with the world is shaped from age 1.5 to 5 or 7 years. You've heard Catholics say, give me a child up to 7 years and they will remain Catholic. So that speaks to the character formation stage. Now, that character formation stage is supposed to happen at home. Home environment is the best school for character formation. Not in boarding, not nurse, not I don't know who. Not matron. Because just imagine, some of us parents are stranded at home with our children and they're just 2, 3, 1.
Yeah.
This matron who has to deal with 1,000 children,
kids.
how can we ever think that this person is going to teach our children character? Now, so I was explaining to you that stage,
very critical.
as a matter of must, let's have our children with us. Because you send a child to school who has no sense of reality. They don't know that there are other people in the world. They haven't been taught the basic things at home. The character of patience, and I'll tell you about mother-children bonding. The parents, especially moms, haven't been able to nurture that soft part of life, which is important. These are aspects like humility, impulse regulation, right? Impulse regulation, care, right? Care, compassion and care, empathy, kindness, resilience, a number of things that are supposed to help us shape a good human being. And then, of course, the issues about conscience, helping the child to understand the difference between right and wrong. Yes. They're not going to learn this from school. They're going to learn it at home. Psychology actually teaches us that 80% of a person's character is supposed to be shaped at home. And then what we take into the world is just for self-improvement and maintenance.
Wow.
Yes. So if home hasn't done its work, and so you send a child whose character is still forming, then they lose out on character formation. Right? Now, you know that, again, in a boarding school, so many children, but also the child doesn't expect that person to teach them. That's why children go to school and they say, a matron or whoever, headmistress or they say, you can't do that. And they go like, are you my mother? Are you my father?
Yes.
So this character formation, very important. So once again, the first 7 years, please don't take your children to boarding school. The stage after, pre-teen, which is, I would say, 8 to 10, 11, that is the time a child's body is changing. We've run a program here, an episode here, where we've talked about teenagers. There are so many things happening. Their world is changing, so they're beginning to see things differently. Now, that's a very delicate junction in life, where a child is beginning to see things differently, and boom, they're in a boarding school, and they are left to be independent, to think on their own and all that. Now, I'll combine that with teenage stage. Teenage stage is actually a stage where it feels acceptable for us to put children in boarding school. And so this is a time, 12, 13 years, when children, they are at this very, very, very delicate stage in life. I always speak to them and say, please don't just throw yourself in the ring. You need to think about your choices. This stage, a child is no longer a child, is not yet an adult, but they are there. Now, I'll tell you as a psychologist that a child's internal working model at this point is going to determine their adult life, right? This is a stage which is characterized by so much depression, because a child is beginning to think so much about their identity, what am I going to be, but also it's characterized by several physical changes, hormones, hormones, especially boys. Boys, the male hormone at this stage increases, stage 10 and 19. The male hormone increases 10 times than it will be at any other stage in life, right? Now, that male hormone, what is it doing in the lives of children? Pushing them to, so many things happening, attraction to the opposite sex and all that. This is a time we get our children and put them in boarding school and lose connection completely. Now, some parents, actually, we don't even consider that this is important, and so you need to keep in touch with the child.
Yeah.
Check in. When they come in for holiday, how much conversation do you have about that? What do we say? Of course, some parents are also not able to have certain conversations at this stage.
Yeah.
Now, this stage is a stage of high-level choices. But a child needs so much help. They need what we call in psychology scaffolding. And so this child needs to say, what is happening here? I'm thinking like this. Now, most of the time parents think, you're rebellious, you're this. Even a child is confused at this point.
Yes.
They don't know what is happening in their body. They don't know what is happening to their cognition. And they see they are doing things a certain way. I've explained before that a child at this, especially teenage stage, they get into a cognitive structure called their thinking process changes from concrete to abstract thinking. So they are no longer thinking about what you've told them as a parent. No, they are actually now scanning the horizon, thinking about these things, questioning the systems that you have taught them before. So this is a stage where they need a lot of reinforcement. They need to be helped because they are going to ask why. This is a stage where they need a why. They have a why behind every word. Let's go to church. Why? Do I need to go to church to meet God? God is everywhere. You see? You need to call, this is your uncle. What do you mean they are my uncle?
How?
Are we related?
I've never seen them.
I've never seen them. All the things, all the discipline we are teaching them, they tend to question it at this stage. Now at that time, that's where most parents lose connection with their children. Children, their world view is shaped from home and from their parents. I always say the number one protection unit for a child is their parents, because they see the world through their parents. They learn confidence, they learn to trust the world, they learn to relate with the world through their parents. And so when they see their parents around them, they are protected, they have security. When they are left to go on their own, it can be very disorganizing. Now, sometimes when young children are left to go to school, they perceive that, to boarding school at an early stage, they perceive that as rejection. Right? Yeah, because they just are thrown in the sea of nowhere. And so they perceive it as rejection, which is a recipe for depression, for loneliness, and all manner of character disorders. And actually, studies have shown that children who have gone to boarding school so early tend to be angry. Yeah, they tend to be aggressive. They suffer more depression because they have, as I said, they have perceived their parents to be rejecting, and they don't trust easily because they say, if my parents could do this, then I can't trust anyone. Yeah, so that is challenging. But also to say, for instance, moms, when children are detached from parents, from moms at an early stage, they tend to suffer. They suffer. Their attachment style, how they relate with people, tends to be anxious, right? So they have that anxious attachment because they are worried that
you might leave.
Yeah, you might leave anytime. And so they don't trust, because trust, connection, compassion, and all that is taught by attachment to moms. So when a child is disconnected, then they don't attach. Now, I'm aware that we started off from the point of bonding. Now, their bonding, their ability to bond is affected, right? Yeah, so they feel like, I can't bond with anyone because they are about to hurt me, they are about to reject me, they are about to do that. Especially, once again, 0 to 7 years. Please, as much as possible, let's first connect with the children, give them the confidence that we love them, that they can trust us, that we make good decisions for them. And then later on, because you see, we tend to look at physical development, but we don't look at cognitive development.
Yes.
The brain, how is it processing all that is happening? You may be having good intentions, maybe you're stuck and all, but are you sure
the
taking
right
your
decision.
3-year-old child to boarding school is the only option
It's
you
the
have?
only option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even in listening to what you're saying, there might be, because children, we keep hearing this a lot, children are different, children are unique, and then also the challenges in our homes are unique to, to different families. Is it possible that there are children who are not suited for boarding school? And I guess how can a parent know that I don't think my child will thrive in boarding school? Even if we have, the whole context here in Uganda, in Africa, where boarding school is inevitable, especially when a child turns 11 or 12, can a parent go against that narrative and say, no, well, that may be my child, I know my child based on A, B, C, D, E, and I don't think they're suited for...
No, I hear you, and yes, I'll say that. Most of the time we just go with the flow, but there are certain children who need more attention.
True.
And so it's very important for parents to know their children and say, if this one, there are children who are more clingy for whatever reason, and who are more relational, who probably are not yet, they're like sensitive. The readiness, the sensitive children who are not ready. Do you probably want to have them a little more? Do they have to go to school, to boarding school like any other? There are children who develop a sense of independence at an early age, especially firstborns.
Yes.
Yeah, so they tend to be really like ready to go. If at age 11 or 12 they still can be on their own. Please note that I'm not a fan of boarding school.
No, you're not. So you might be. No, I don't think you're biased. I think you're...
Yes, yeah. I'm trying to be as open as can be, but and impartial, but it's very, very important to understand our child. Number one. Number two, to get over this whole notion of boarding school is going to teach my child.
Yeah, yes. and I want you to talk about that, because I have heard of parents who have been busy and they're not around, so all they're seeing is the things their child is doing wrong. Or my child spends too much time on the phone, or my child doesn't listen, or my child doesn't do that, but that's because you have not taken the time to teach them. And so their first solution is, let me ship them off to boarding school, they'll face life, and life will kind of align them. What's the danger in that?
The danger in that is, parents, we tend to think life has to be hard to teach us.
That part, yes.
I always ask parents, how many of you remember a good teacher? Do you know we remember a good teacher?
We do.
About 2 years ago, we were celebrating our headmaster, and everyone their hearts were melting. And all these testimonies were flowing about how this guy was such a wonderful teacher. But how many of us love a bad teacher? We have good memories of a bad teacher. So this whole thing of life has to teach us the hard way, that's not the only way people learn. No, actually human nature, we learn more from grace and kindness. We connect more with messages that are covered by grace. That's why as a parenting coach, I always tell parents, when you're so angry and agitated, that's not a teaching moment for your child, because you need to deal with your emotions. When you're screaming and yelling, a child doesn't hear a message, they hear noise. And so for us to think that the hard way, there is a bit of that in life. We all need a little bit of that to develop resilience. We don't develop resilience from a place of comfort. However, that's the only thing that the child will learn. No. They need to learn to be a good human being. They need to learn a realistic way of life. They need to learn a number of things. They need to learn humility. They need to learn all this character formation. Character formation is not just about resilience.
No, it's not.
No, so you're not just thrown into the bush and you're running away from lions in order for you to learn. No, that's not what it is. And so, yes, there is a place for learning in a boarding school. There is a place where they have to do things on their own, but make sure a parent doesn't consider that that's the only learning they have to do.
I hope not.
Now, I have said this, let me repeat it, Rachel. Parents need to know that a child's brain is like wet cement. What we write there is what sticks. Now, I'm aware that some parents are saying, are you sure? My child, I teach them things, they don't stick.
They don't stick.
Don't
My
worry.
child doesn't listen.
Don't worry. You know, it's somewhere there. They're not processing it. That's why the Bible tells us, train up a child in the way they should go. And when they are old, they will not turn away from it. There is a deposit you're putting in a child. And this deposit, at the right time, it will come up. It will be processed. Now, parents should not take the comfort in the fact that boarding schools are going to teach children a character. No. Actually, children take character to a boarding school. That's why there's so much trouble in schools.
That's true.
These children who are burning schools and doing all manner of things, probably they are angry from school, from home. They feel rejected. They hate the world. They can't trust anyone. And so all these things are not taught in school.
Unfortunately. No.
Unfortunately. And by the time children get to school, the character formation stage is done, rather to boarding school, especially in Uganda, where we take children who are teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Teenagers going to senior one. Yeah, so let's not take comfort in that. Remember, numbers in a school, you see, teaching requires attention.
Yeah.
So if you cannot pay attention to your child, some of us who have more than one child, you know what it means? Every child is a full-time job.
That's true.
Every child is a project. Number one, they are different. So you have to understand how you raise this one is not the same way you raise. There are those who are receptive, there are those who are strugglers, there are those, and that's okay. Each child needs particular attention.
Yeah.
So then we have thousands in a boarding school, and we think teachers are going to teach them. Teachers also have their own children. The school matron has their own children. They're also struggling, headmistress, plus the numbers they have to deal with. Let's be realistic.
Yeah, there's no way.
There's no way.
It's just no way.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be a parent who is watching, and based on the reasons you gave up above, circumstantial, convenience, I work late, I'm tired of nannies and maids, I must take my
domestic
child.
violence.
Domestic violence, you know, I'm trying to create a better environment for my child. They are inevitably going to make the decision to take their child to boarding school. What would you say to them to be cautious about, especially when it comes to the bond that they share with their child? Is it finally, I have a solution, ship to boarding school, never to be heard again until after 3 months? Are there things that they can do in between, you know, to maintain that bond and even have it grow stronger? Is it possible?
You see, that's right. And I'm very sure those who are watching are not saying these girls are not realistic.
They're not. They're out of this world.
We are not out of this world.
No, we're not.
You see, Rachel, life is about intentionality. Now, when we are teaching children, there is what we call the power of impression. And you being a media personality, probably you know that better than me. But in teaching, there's power of repetition. That's why companies like media companies who are running adverts, they'll repeat it, so that it gets there. When children leave us and go to boarding school, we have to know that we've lost that opportunity to repeat the message. You see? When my child is going to school in the morning, I remind him of the 4 B's. You see, I'll tell you the 4 B's. 4 B's is you've come out of bed, don't know about that, and you've bathed, brushed your teeth, made your bed, had breakfast. So, and I want to tell you, he doesn't do this all the time.
No, he doesn't.
You see? So we go back to, have you done your 4 B's? Yeah. Or other times, he'll move down, have breakfast before he brushes. You know that kind of thing. But you see, for us to develop a character in a child, there has to be consistency.
Got it.
And so when a child goes to boarding school, and I'm just talking about just that, but I also talk about like behavior issues, reminding the power of impression. The power of impression emphasizes that effectiveness of a message is in the number of times it is repeated or mentioned. Now, as parents, we've not understood that actually boarding school, the moment your child goes to boarding school, it cuts you off your child. And when they return, they go for 3 months, come for 2 weeks. Right? Yeah. Now, when they come for 2 weeks, if we are not intentional, which I'm going to emphasize, when we are not intentional, you can easily disconnect with your child 100%.
Yeah.
So once you know what you have missed, then you have to be intentional. Now what happens is that this child will come for 2 weeks, the parent is still very busy, even because they're, like for instance, parents, we encourage parents, the time your children are on holiday, please schedule your leave so that you spend time with them.
Yes.
You see, effective bonding is a product of both quantity and quality time.
Yeah.
The conversations you have, the little things you do. You remember when we were talking about parenting, we say let it not be structured and the child says, oh my God, I'm here for a lecture. But you go out together, you're here, it's relaxed, you can smuggle in a message, you can do that. So intentionality is also seen in the way we schedule our leave. Once you know that you have lost time, then you know. But now what happens? Children come, you only wake up when children are going back and then you're driving them to school, and you're saying,
trying to
don't
fix.
Don't ashame us.
Don't ashame us. Stay away from drugs.
Stay away. Bad company.
Bad company.
Probably they are also already bad company.
You know.
Yeah. So intentionality, but also parents understanding the effects, because you see, our choices are rooted in understanding.
Got it.
When we don't know, when we have just one side of life, like we know that boarding schools give us this, the benefits are this, children are there, they are protected, they are not. But then you don't know what you're losing. They are going to lose out on authority.
Yes.
They are not going to learn leadership because they are not home. They are going to lose out on confidence building. But dads bring in confidence building, but also risk taking, the courage, all that. So you've plucked them out of the family, thrown them there, and you haven't considered that something to learn. So parents need to understand what a child is, the danger
of taking the
child to school, and then make the decision.
Yeah.
But should it be inevitable that they have to know? Rachel, intentionality.
Yeah.
Be intentional. Be intentional. Try to make up time for some of these things and be with your children.
It's so funny because if a parent decides I'm taking my child to boarding school because I don't have time to be a parent, quote unquote, and yet now you have to work almost twice as hard to maintain a bond, maintain, you know, your footing in your child's life to be able to still be able to teach them things. It's like you're trying to solve one problem, but you're creating another for yourself, you know, and trying to make up for lost time. Yeah. I don't know about you, but every time I'm seated here and we're talking about parenting, especially parenting, it's always refreshing for me to learn, you know, things that I need to know, especially in being a parent and a good mom. So thank you, Dr. Evas, for taking the time once again to teach us and giving us information that can make us better parents. So that's it. If you are on the fence about this decision, I know the year has already begun. Some of you have already taken your children to boarding school. I hope this information will help you to either align and be firm in your decision, but then make effort to create, to make sure that the bond sticks and that you are spending time with your child and being intentional about creating a bond or continuing with the bond that you had created. Let us know, of course, in our comment section. We love hearing your feedback. Please let us know what you thought of this conversation. And we'll be back next week with yet another topic for you to learn from. In the meantime, subscribe, like this episode, and share it with a parent or someone who might be thinking to themselves, maybe I'm the way I am because my parents took me to boarding school. Perhaps the time wasn't right. Useful information. Thank you for watching. Stay well, stay healthy.